My name is Margaret, and I'm 68 years old. I've lived alone for nearly a decade now, ever since my husband passed from a sudden heart attack. Life has been quiet, predictable, and in many ways, lonely. But nothing could have prepared me for the day I sat in that lawyer's office, my hands trembling, listening as my son's will was read. I remember the air in the room. It felt heavy, like the oxygen had been sucked out. My daughter-in-law sat straight-backed in her chair, dressed in a sleek black dress, her fingers tapping impatiently on the armrest. Everyone assumed she would walk away with everything: the house, the savings, the business assets. She seemed so sure of it, her confidence almost unbearable to watch. And then the lawyer's voice shifted. Instead of confirming her expectations, he announced something that stunned the room into silence. The old farmhouse, the one tucked away in the hills outside of town, was left to me. Not to her, not to the estate, but to me alone. I could feel her eyes burning into me, her composure cracking just slightly. For years, that farmhouse had been nothing more than a memory, a place where my son spent summers fishing, riding bikes, and running through the fields with scraped knees and a smile too wide for his face. It was neglected now, almost forgotten. So why, of all things, would he leave it to me as I sat there clutching my handbag? I couldn't shake the unease crawling over my skin. My son's death had already felt strange, the kind of tragedy that gnawed at the edges of my thoughts in the quiet hours of the night. Now, with this unexpected inheritance, I felt as though a door had been cracked open to a truth I wasn't supposed to see. The others in the room carried on with the legalities, but I was no longer listening. My mind was back at that farmhouse, peeling paint, dusty windows, and echoes of laughter from a life I desperately missed. I could almost hear my son's voice in the wind, urging me to go back, to look closer. People often underestimate me. They see an older woman, a widow, someone content to fade quietly into the background. But I know my son. I know the kind of man he was, and I know he would never leave me something without a reason. That farmhouse holds an answer, maybe even the truth about what really happened to him. And so, even as the room buzzed with whispers and thinly veiled tension, I made a silent promise to myself I would go there. I would walk through every creaking hallway, open every locked drawer, and uncover whatever he wanted me to find. Because if my son trusted me with this, then it meant something bigger than anyone else in that office could imagine. I didn't know it yet, but that farmhouse would change everything. It would unravel the story behind his death and expose secrets darker than I was ready to face. But at that moment, all I knew was this: I had to go back, and soon. They told me it was an accident. A single vehicle crash on a dark stretch of highway just past midnight. The police said he must have dozed off behind the wheel, the car veering into the guardrail before rolling down the embankment. Quick, final. Nothing anyone could have done. That's how they framed it, as if death could ever be so tidy. I remember the call. It came at 2 a.m. My body jolted awake, as if it already knew what the words would be before they were spoken. I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching the phone until my knuckles turned white, my chest heavy with a silence so deep I thought it might crush me. My boy, gone. The funeral was a blur of flowers and whispered condolences. I stood in black, my mind split between numb disbelief and raw grief. My daughter-in-law played her role flawlessly. She wore the widow's veil, kept her eyes red-rimmed, but never let a single tear streak her carefully powdered face. She moved through the crowd like a director, keeping conversations brief, redirecting anyone who lingered too long. I had wanted a service open to all neighbors, friends, old teammates from high school. My son was loved, and I wanted that love reflected in the faces gathered to say goodbye. But she insisted on something small, private, controlled. She said he would have wanted it that way. Maybe it was the grief clouding my judgment, but something about the way she decided for everyone else gnawed at me. There were moments during the burial that broke me. Watching the casket lowered into the ground, I felt as if my own body was being pulled down with it. But even through the fog of grief, I noticed details that unsettled me. She refused certain family members' entry, claiming it was what he wanted. She kept checking her watch, like there was somewhere else she needed to be. And when people spoke kindly of him, his laugh, his kindness, the way he made everyone feel seen, her face barely shifted. In the months before his death, I had sensed distance in him. He stopped calling as often, and when he did, his voice was clipped, distracted. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, he brushed me off with reassurances that felt rehearsed. I told myself it was just the pressures of work, the busyness of life. But now, looking back, I can't ignore it. My son was pulling away, hiding something, and maybe protecting me from something he didn't want me to know. Standing by his grave, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the whole story. He was a cautious driver, meticulous about safety. He hated driving at night, often choosing to stay over rather than risk a late drive home. Why, then, would he be out on that road at that hour? Why alone? My daughter-in-law carried herself as if she were the victim of an inevitable tragedy. Yet her grip on everything, the funeral, the estate, even the words people were allowed to say, made my stomach twist. Was it just control? Her way of managing grief? Or was there something darker beneath the surface? I wanted to believe the accident explanation. It would have been easier to accept. But in the quiet of my house, when the condolences stopped and the food platters disappeared, I found myself replaying every detail. The sudden distance, the rushed funeral, the cold efficiency with which she handled his death. It didn't add up. And then came the will. That farmhouse, that odd, unexpected gift left to me. The mother who was supposed to fade into the background. I could almost hear him whispering from the grave, urging me not to trust what I'd been told. I don't know why yet, but I know this much I have to find out. And it starts at that farmhouse. The drive out to the farmhouse took nearly an hour, though it felt longer. The highway gave way to narrower roads, winding through fields and stretches of forest that seemed frozen in time. I hadn't been out there in years, not since my son was a boy chasing fireflies in the fields, his laughter rising into the summer night like music. As the miles slipped past, I found myself drifting into memories, picnics on the porch, his muddy shoes left by the door, the smell of pancakes wafting through the kitchen on Sunday mornings. But the closer I got, the heavier those memories felt. The road narrowed, lined with trees pressing in like silent watchers. The farmhouse finally came into view, its roof sagging a little, paint peeling, windows clouded with dust. Yet even in its neglect, it carried a strange pull, as though it had been waiting for me. I parked and stepped out, gravel crunching under my shoes. The air smelled of damp leaves and old wood. My hand shook as I turned the key in the lock, half expecting the door to resist after so many years. But it opened easily, swinging inward as if someone had oiled the hinges not long ago. The inside was exactly as I remembered, yet wrong in subtle ways. Dust lay thick on the mantel, but the kitchen counter was wiped clean. The air was stale, but faintly laced with the bitter scent of coffee. I froze when I spotted a mug sitting in the sink, a dark ring clinging to its rim. It couldn't have been more than a day old. I moved cautiously from room to room. The living room felt lived in, though no one was supposed to have been here for years. A chair was angled toward the driveway, the kind of placement you'd choose if you were waiting for someone to arrive. On the table beside it sat a spiral notebook. I opened it and found page after page of numbers, license plates, dates, and times neatly logged. My son's handwriting. My chest tightened. He had been here? Recently. He had been watching someone. Or maybe being watched himself? The creak of the floor under my own weight pulled me back. I remembered the loose board by the hallway closet, the one my husband had cursed years ago but never fixed. Almost on instinct, I pried it up. Beneath it, wedged into the dark cavity, was a metal box, cold against my fingers. I carried it into the light and forced it open. Inside were photographs, grainy shots of my daughter-in-law stepping into cars late at night, speaking with men I didn't recognize, exchanging envelopes, bank statements, wires transferring thousands of dollars in and out of hidden accounts, notes scrawled in my son's handwriting about inconsistencies in her stories, her business trips, her late-night phone calls. My stomach lurched as the pieces began to form a picture. He hadn't been distant out of disinterest. He had been protecting me. He had been digging into her life, documenting everything, trying to uncover something dangerous. And then he was gone. The accident. The perfectly timed, perfectly convenient accident. The box trembled in my hands as a wave of grief and fury swept over me. If what I was holding was true, then my son hadn't just died on that road by chance. Someone had wanted him silenced. I don't know how long I sat there staring at those papers, the silence of the farmhouse pressing down on me like a weight. The air felt too still, too heavy, as though the house itself knew secrets I wasn't ready for. And then I heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel outside. My heart leapt into my throat. I shoved the papers back into the box and pushed it beneath the couch just as footsteps climbed the porch. The doorknob turned, and the door swung open with casual familiarity. My daughter-in-law stepped inside, her heels clicking against the floorboards. She carried herself with the same polished grace she had at the funeral. But this time, there was no veil, no performance of grief, just sharp eyes scanning the room. And then I saw it glinting in her hand. A key. She had a key to this farmhouse. The air left my lungs as realization hit me. I wasn't supposed to be here. Whatever my son had uncovered, whatever had driven him here, she knew about it too. And now, she knew I was standing in the middle of it. She walked into the farmhouse like she owned it, her heels striking the old wooden floor in crisp, confident clicks. The sight of that key in her hand told me everything I needed to know. My daughter-in-law hadn't just visited this place, she had been here. Often. Suddenly. The warm coffee pot, the surveillance notebook, the rearranged furniture, all of it made sense. My heart pounded against my ribs as I pressed my back to the wall, wondering if I should slip quietly out the back door. Hiding would have been the safest choice, but I had never been good at hiding. Not from the truth. Not from anyone. So I forced myself to stand in plain sight, my voice steady, though my hands trembled at my sides. She looked startled for only a second, before her mask returned the same mask she'd worn at the funeral. The one that made strangers call her graceful and strong. But now I could see the cracks. Her eyes flicked toward the kitchen, where the coffee still sat warm in the pot. Then back to me. That tiny hesitation confirmed what my gut already screamed: she had been living a double life, and my son had known it. A quiet rage rose in me. My boy had been documenting her every move. He must have discovered something dangerous. And then, as if by coincidence, he ended up dead. I kept my face calm, but inside I was unraveling. I could almost hear my son's voice, the way he used to reassure me when he was a child. He had always been cautious, always careful. If he had left records here, then he had known he was in danger. After what felt like an eternity, she finally left. The sound of her car crunching back down the driveway was a small relief, but my body stayed tense. I knew better than to think I was safe. That's when I remembered the basement. As a boy, my son had always hidden his treasures there: comic books, baseball cards, even that bottle of whiskey he smuggled out when he was 16. Mothers notice these things, even when we pretend we don't. If he had left anything important, it would be down there. I crept to the basement door. It groaned open, the air below colder, heavier. Against one wall was something new, a steel safe, far too modern for this old house. My breath caught. This wasn't some old hiding place. This was deliberate. It took me a few minutes of fumbling, but eventually I found a small override key taped inside an old mason jar labeled cookies. My boy had never outgrown his habits. With shaking hands, I turned the key, the safe clicked, and the door swung open. Inside was more than I had dared to hope. Files, photographs, financial records enough to bury her and whatever she was tangled up in. But what froze me in place was the laptop, still powered, its screen glowing with a recorded video. I pressed play, and my son's face filled the screen. He looked tired, older than I remembered, but his eyes were clear. He began to speak directly to me. He told me that if I was watching, it meant he hadn't made it to his meeting with federal agents. He explained everything: the laundering, the dangerous men, and the fact that his wife was not grieving, but orchestrating. Then came the part that shattered me. He admitted he had staged his death. The accident was supposed to be a cover, a way to protect me while he helped bring down the operation. But something had gone wrong. He hadn't called the FBI. The system he set up hadn't triggered, which meant I was sitting here, holding evidence people would kill to silence. I sank to the floor, my hands gripping the edges of the laptop. My son had risked everything to protect me, and now I was standing in the wreckage of a plan that had unraveled, and outside, somewhere in the darkness, I knew she would be back. She wasn't finished. The moment I closed the safe, I heard the sound tires crunching hard against gravel, doors slamming, voices carrying through the night. She wasn't alone this time. My blood ran cold. I grabbed the box, tucked the laptop under my arm, and slipped out the back door before their footsteps reached the porch. The woods swallowed me whole. Branches tore at my arms, the ground uneven beneath my shoes. My breath came in sharp bursts, the kind of breathing that makes your chest ache. I could hear them behind me, men's voices, her voice, calling, searching. I wasn't just trespassing anymore. I was prey. I forced myself deeper into the trees, crouching low behind a fallen log. My hands shook as I fumbled with the small satellite phone I'd found in the safe. My son must have left it for emergencies. I dialed the only number stored in it. The line clicked, and for a terrifying second I thought no one would answer. Then a voice broke through the static. His voice. My son's voice. I nearly dropped the phone. He was alive. He explained in a rush he had staged everything, but the operation had gone sideways. He'd been hiding, feeding evidence to the FBI through encrypted channels. They were closing in on her network, but she had moved faster than anyone expected. Tears blurred my vision. Relief, fury, disbelief, they all hit at once. My son had been alive all this time, and yet I had mourned him, buried him, carried that unbearable grief. I wanted to scream at him for keeping me in the dark, for letting me believe he was gone. And yet hearing his voice was the only thing keeping me steady in that moment. He told me the truth about her. She wasn't just a manipulative widow, she was a professional honey trap. Part of a criminal ring that lured wealthy men into marriages, drained their accounts, and staged accidents to erase them. My son had gotten too close, and she had almost succeeded in erasing him, too. The phone buzzed again. His voice sharp this time. Stay alive. Stay hidden. Agents were on their way. I pressed myself tighter against the ground, the sound of footsteps circling closer through the trees. The weight of everything I'd uncovered settled on me. My son was alive, but the danger was greater than ever. And in that dark, breathless moment, I knew the final confrontation was coming. When the FBI finally moved in, everything happened quickly. My daughter-in-law was taken away in handcuffs. Her polished mask shattered as the truth of her double life spilled into the light. The men she worked with were rounded up, their entire operation dismantled piece by piece. Watching it unfold, I felt both vindicated and hollow relief that justice had come, and sorrow for all the families before me who had never been given answers. I realized then that people had always seen me as just a quiet, aging widow. But it was my persistence, my instinct as a mother, that had uncovered what others overlooked. I wasn't weak or forgotten, I had been the key. A mother's love doesn't fade with time or distance. It sharpens, it fights, it survives. If my story touched you, I'd love to hear yours. Share your thoughts below, like this video, and let's keep the conversation alive.